Bernadette.
You're St. Bernadette, are you? From Lourdes? Because I'm from Mary, okay.
Florence from St. Bernadette.
Florence from St. Bernadette's.
Ferdinand, I'm from Belgium.
From Ferdinand from Belgium.
Julie from Rockingham, but
Julie.
I remember you when you were at St. Thomas More in Bacon and I worked there.
Oh my Lord, okay.
Yeah,
I
and
recognise your face.
Yeah, and I saw your name on the form,
Yeah.
because I teach just here at Mother Teresa now.
Okay.
And I thought, go anything by John Daly, so here I am.
No
It's a
pressure.
long time ago.
Yeah, I remember your face. So,
Kevin, welcome to my home.
Kevin, welcome to my home. That's what all the Kiwis say when they come to Australia. Sorry, Kevin.
I'm Patrick from Beldives.
Patrick from Beldives, and I'm John from Mundaring. So, oh, sorry, Helen, you're the most important person.
Welcome you lovely people from this
Okay, praise God. So I'll talk to you a little bit, and if you've got questions, is that all right? Is that like the way you do it?
We've never done it.
Okay, neither have I sort of, I'm always very honoured to be able to talk about Mother Teresa, because if I had not met her, I don't know if I would have been a priest. So at varying points in my development, I think I was right for the picking when I went to Calcutta. But as I say, I was going there looking for something from her, and the sister who met me is named Sister Josma, a very beautiful sister. But most of the sisters have a beautiful way about them. There's such a joy about them. They can be cranky, all right, don't worry about that, but there's a great joy about them. And often when you hear them in the morning, one of the great things I used to love is when one sister's going away, or more sisters are going away, they come down to the statue of Our Lady, and everyone, because there's like, the chapel's on the second floor, and then there's another floor above that, and there's all like kind of like little balconies, and they all come to the balcony, and the sisters sing the most beautiful song to farewell. And it's just, it's joyful, it's the most joyful thing you've ever seen, and you can't help, you know, sort of, even people, I know, I worked with a lot of atheists over the years as well, and they're very moved by the sheer kind of like beauty of the lives that the sisters live. So it's a very attractive kind of life, and it's a very challenging life, because when someone I was working with would move toward becoming a sister, or even a priest, but a sister more so, we would laughingly say 2 saris in a bucket, which means that that's all you've got, 2 saris in a bucket. You've got no possessions, no phone, no TVs, no books, no radio. You've got nothing. You've got 2 saris, one that you wear, one that you wash, one that you dry, and the bucket you wash them in, and that's it. And it's a tough gig. One of my friends, I met her at World Youth Day, a young lady named Stephanie Dewey. She's an Indonesian Catholic. I met her at World Youth Day in Krakow about 4 years ago. And she came to India with me 2 years ago. And she wanted to do a come and see, which is where they spend time with the sisters in a home. The sisters didn't really want to do it for someone from Australia. But I said, really, I tried to get them to do it, and they did. They let her do 2 weeks. And when I picked her up, I knew. I didn't ask her. I didn't ask her how it went, because I knew, because she was literally glowing. And she's currently in Dili doing her first session, if you like, as a postulant. So, but she was a scientist. She owned her own home. She was 30 years of age. Everything was going in her favour, and she turned her back on all of that to take this path. And her parents, the resistance from her parents was enormous. And her friend, who's also in Catholic ministry, but she didn't want to lose her partner in crime. And it was a difficult path, particularly when COVID put it all on hold. And she had to wait for nearly 8 months. And I said, it's good, it's a crucible of whether or not it's a genuine vocation. But the call to be a sister is a difficult one. There's no doubt about that. And I don't know, do you know how many sisters there are in the world?
I was taught in Loreto School actually in Melbourne.
Okay.
We had a full complement of teachers, they were all nuns. And they were beautiful. There was no corporal punishment, no individual punishment for anyone. But what they expected from the girls was, absolute, what's the word? It's not. We had to respect our school, we had to respect our church, respect our our place, and they were gentle, and they expected us to be gentle. There was no such thing as bullying then.
No, I went to a different school.
No, I'm not older than you folks.
I was expelled from my Catholic school in grade 4. So I never went to a Catholic school after that again. I was like,
So you
one
were a
punch
naughty
and that
little
was
boy,
it.
you became a good little boy.
Well, that's the jury's still out. So, but the Missionaries of Charity have more than 4,000 sisters in over 160 countries. They're one of the few religious organisations who've been able to get into places like Yemen, which is an extraordinarily difficult place. Sisters have been killed in these places. I know that in Yemen, 4 sisters were killed just over 18 months ago. It's a violent place. 20 sisters in one house last year in Africa had COVID-19. 20 at one time were being cared for with COVID. And because their community is so small and they share dormitories, there's no rooms. Who's the only person who had a single room in the Missionaries of Charity Mother House?
I bet it wasn't Mother Charity.
It was Mother. Yeah.
It was Mother.
Spoiled brats. but like as a superior general, but it was nothing. It was like, you know, sort of it was a bed and just a little window and a chair. That was it.
It wasn't a bed like we sleep in.
No, it was a very simple bed. But the sisters, they generally sleep in dormitories where you would probably have as many as 12 to 15 beds, and they're not bunk beds, thanks be to God for that. But even the uncompromising nature of Mother, I think they didn't have fans for a long time. I think that was a post-Mother's death introduction. So a lot of sisters, can you imagine trying to sleep? I lived in Calcutta for 10 years. The humidity is horrendous. I mean, horrendous. I used to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, have a shower, because the prickly heat was so bad. Dry myself off and put powder all over myself and just pray that I didn't sweat so much before I got up in the morning. And it was really tough. And water was never really reliable. It's a tough place. So when Mother left in, I think, 1948, so what happened in India in 1947 was partition. You know what partition was? Where the English left independence and partition. And so all of the Hindus from the north were coming south and all of the Muslims from the south were heading north. And what did they do when they arrived in the middle? It was this mass kind of like violence. And Calcutta's right on the gates to what we know today as Bangladesh, but in those days it would have been East Pakistan. And so their Mother pretty much leaves Entally to go into this kind of madness. Do you know about her call in the train station in Sealda, where she's a principal in St Mary's Entally, very comfortable school. It has a wall all the way around it, lovely green fields where the girls can play. It's a girls' school, solely girls' school. And it's just a beautiful place, a lovely church or chapel that will probably seat about 250 people. Beautiful. And on the way to her retreat in Darjeeling, which is high ground, which is cooler, she was in the train waiting to leave. In Sealda station, we used to go in there, I used to work in there pretty much every day, and the commuter traffic every day is over 2 million people a day, just through this place, thronging through. And Mother sees someone who says, "Give me some water. Give me some water." And she sees this person become Christ in front of her, asking for water. And the train leaves, but this doesn't leave her, it stays with her. And she starts to see Christ in the poor. This is the transformation, that she sees Christ in the poor. And she immediately, upon return, starts to talk to a superior about getting dispensation, not to leave the religious life, but to start a new order, which is, it doesn't happen a lot. So the bishop was reluctant, the superior general was reluctant. They all thought maybe she just, sort of...
It took a long time, didn't it?
Took over 2 years,
Yes,
So, and she got a house given to her by the Gomes family in a place called Creek Lane, which was kind of the upper part of their house, which was kind of the nicest place. But she was out on the street begging, really, for, in a time, like, there's a lot of competition for begging in Calcutta. There's a lot of competition for begging, and there's a lot of competition for need. But she went straight into the slums down the back where Entally was and started to teach there. And you know who her first kind of like followers were, the first sisters to join her? They were her former Year 12 students.
Yes.
They left Year 12 to come and join her, and many of their parents were not happy at all.
No.
Like, are you? No, because they had their own grand ideas, as parents do. They're like, it's normal that parents want their children to do well.
Sent them to that school to become ladies.
Yes, yeah, not to become nuns and go and live wearing a sari, living in poverty. And that's the humble beginnings, but what a tough call. And things start to happen, and places start to be given to them by different places. Like ICI gave them pram done, and people would give them, food. I remember as an early volunteer going and picking up, in the afternoon. I used to work an afternoon shift and go down to ICI and pick up the stuffs of subjis like a curry and rice and all this stuff would be there. And then the ambulance would pull up and we'd put it all in the back of the ambulance and we'd all go to Cardigan and work for the afternoon. But it's just it's the most beautiful life. I didn't want to leave Calcutta to come home. And the call was so strong for me to become a priest. And I thought, maybe they won't accept me. I was kind of hoping they wouldn't. But I was very happy. But the call was so strong. It was almost like I had to do it. And I came home, and the day I drove into the seminary for an interview with Bishop Healy, do you remember Bishop Healy? He had a very northern accent, like a big wee man he was. And so Bishop Healy, I'm driving in at 6 o'clock on a Friday night, the 5th of September. What happens on the 5th of September? Mother Teresa died. 1998. I'm driving into the seminary, 1997, sorry. I'm driving into the seminary, and on the radio it goes, Mother Teresa of Calcutta just died. I couldn't believe it. I was like, very emotional. But at the same time, I thought, this for me is a signal that I've got to move on. Right here, it's powerful. So I had my interview with Bishop Healy, and he said, we'll accept you to be part of the seminary. I was 38 years of age. I thought I was done, I'm too old, I hadn't been to school for 20 years, and I had to go to university, which was intriguing. I didn't know how to use a computer, and all of a sudden I had to use a computer. But Mother gave that sense that always trust in the providence of God. That's a big thing for her. Trust in the providence of God, and we don't. We like to hedge our bets. I'll look after myself. I'll trust in you as well, but I'll look after myself. So it's trusting in the providence of God. Like when I was coming home to join the seminary, I still had doubts. I was going out with a girl in Calcutta, a Spanish girl, and it was very painful that we kind of broke apart. And I really wasn't sure if I had a vocation still, because you doubt in those moments of difficulty. And I walked into a place in Kuala Lumpur airport on the way home and sat down at a table, and this girl with me on the flight, she sat down opposite me and she goes, do you mind if I sit down? It was kind of crowded. And I said, yeah, if you want. And she said to me, are you a priest? And I said, no. And she goes, oh, I thought you were a priest. I'm like, where does that come from? So that for me was, I learned about discernment. Discernment is just not me discerning, it's the world discerning, it's the church discerning. And she was a signpost. She was there to give me some sense of comfort. And I felt much more comfortable moving toward the seminary after that. But the challenge of discipleship that she gives you is that it's that take up your cross and renounce yourself.
So you had a few signs.
I had lots of signs,
Yes.
yeah. I'm thick, basically. like most men, sorry there, lads. Kev's laughing.
But my eyes can't see stuff and it's right there. Oh!
Well, John,
They say to have a man look
Sorry.
when I was in South Africa, I used to run a Catholic guest house, and I had a priest staying there that came from the Vatican, and he came over to Lesotho to make a priest blessed, and he worked with Mother Teresa.
Okay.
And he used to tell me stories of when he said about putting you like this. He said she was one hard lady, and he said he remember sitting with the Pope and there was John Paul, and she said, I want to now literally like that.
She was very uncompromising. Yeah.
A very strong lady, and you know, him and I were chatting about, we used to chat over dinners and that, and he said if she was in business, she would be a fantastic businesswoman.
Yeah.
So don't think she's a pushover little, you know.
Yeah, there's a picture of one. There's a lot of beautiful black and white books
Yeah.
in Calcutta, and Calcutta is just it's a treasure trove of stuff like that. And there's these wonderful big books, black and white, and pictures of mother. And there's one of her shaking her finger at Yasser Arafat from the PLO.
Wow.
And it's the most powerful image, because he's not that big either. She looks like a giant, yes. But like Mother Teresa, she's only this high.
Yeah.
She's no bigger than this. Like, and her toes were deformed very badly. She had terrible. Her toes used to come out almost on a right angle. And she used to wear these awful sandals that, but again, it was being in poverty, living a simple life.
It gives you a perception of this hill lady that you don't want to mess with.
But at the same time, she was the most, as I said before, she was the most humble person in her house.
Yeah.
But at the same
She
time,
can be sweet, nice, but if you want something, I'm going to get it.
she was very firm. One night, I was in the chapel. And it was adoration at night. I was so tired. I'd been up since 4:30 in the morning. I was doing meditation before Mass, studying and going to Mass. And I was sitting there cross-legged against the wall, and I just must have nodded off. Sisters couldn't wake me up. At the end, everyone had gone, but I'm still there. Sisters couldn't wake me up. So what do? Men cannot be in the convent after a particular hour. That's just it. It's not heard of. So they go to get Mother. So Mother comes and wakes me up, and she's not shy. Wake up, wake up, wake up. And I wake up and she goes, you must go right now. It's not, sorry to wake you, John. It would be a good idea if we left it as just, get out,
It's another side.
She's firm, yeah.
Well, none of her sisters could probably go to bed until you were gone.
Yeah, but actually some of us, it's, the MC sisters can be very intimidating, and particularly the more senior sisters. You know, I don't know, like the current Superior General is named Sister Prema, she's a German. She is beautiful.
Yeah.
She is the most gentle soul. She's the biggest Superior General they've had because Mother was that big, and then the one who replaced her was no bigger than her sister Nirmala, and she was previously a lawyer who was a Parsi convert, so she was very kind of highly educated. And then after her came Prema, and Prema again is a professional who is very intelligent, very bright, but very, very gentle, the same as Nirmala. And they were all gentle souls, which is the most beautiful kind of leadership that you want, but firm when they need to be. So, but it's kind of like the sisters have to renounce themselves in order to live for Christ, and that's it. You know, the MC Father, the MC Father is one of my friends, Stephen. I met him when I was back in 1991, back in Perth before I went back again. And we went to St. Charles Seminary. And at the end of the day, Stephen said, are you going to become a priest? And I went, no. And he goes, where are you going? I said, India. And he goes, I'll come with you. So he's now a missionary and charity priest, living and working. His nephew went over about 12 months ago to say hi, and he's still stuck there with the COVID. So his mum sees me periodically. But Stephen's been an MC priest. We were ordained the same year, 2003, and we both celebrated Mass together at Mother's tomb in December that year when we both turned up in Calcutta.
So when you say she's a Sister Sacharia, you know, when did they stop being Loreto nuns?
Well, she left Loreto.
She
left Loreto. So she left the comfort of that order and had a
She had to get special
interim dispensation to start a new order. Yeah, and then she had to chart her own constitution.
Oh, okay.
And I think that most constitutions, in fairness, if they're intelligent enough, will look to St. Benedict, the rule of St. Benedict, and they will incorporate the skeleton of St. Benedict and their own particular things.
Okay.
But for the sisters, the big thing is receiving all of the donations from around the world and being able to not be tainted by money. It's a very big challenge for them because they'll get family members coming to them who want them to help them. And so if you've got 4,000 sisters, it's only a matter of time. There's a percentage of sisters who will, sort of compromise themselves. But that's human nature, that's the nature of who we are. And I suppose the bar's set very high by mother. But those sisters, I love them dearly. Sometimes they frustrate me. I remember arriving at Kalighat, which is the home for the dying. Like for most of the last 20 years, I've been working in the streets. So I still go now and work in January and February every year for 5 weeks, if I can. We sent 2 teams out this morning, one to Seoul Station, one to Harrow Station. And we will pick people up who are very badly off. We've become very kind of like adept at being able to deal with the local law enforcement and being able to negotiate their requirements. We have to go and get a photograph taken of the patient. We have to fill out forms and all this kind of thing in triplicate, and then we move on to the home. And I arrived at Kalighat. Mass there in the morning is 11 o'clock. Maybe it's 10. We arrived 20 minutes before Mass with 2 patients who were very bad, and Sister goes, "But Mass, Father? Mass?" And I'm going, "Patience, Sister, patience." So she goes, "We have no room for the patients." And I said, "Can I just take them in while you're preparing for Mass and at least wash them, give them some clean clothes, and then I'll find somewhere else to take them?" And she said, "Okay." But she was really kind of not happy, Jan. And then after Mass, she came up to me and gave me the signed piece because I was sitting on one of the beds during Mass, and she came over and gave me the signed piece, and she goes, "They can say." but she was just having a bad morning, and I just helped her bad morning get worse.
Yeah.
But
No, you have to get better because you said Mass.
But I could have confronted her, but I know them well enough not to confront them because it's unhelpful, it's disrespectful. So I just try to work around it a little bit and find my way in the door. And so there's an incredible generosity, but they're doing this 7 days a week. They don't get a break. Their day of rest is Thursday, and they pray all day. I said to one of the sisters, "Why don't we go to the pictures?" "Hello, Mum, you're a man. Go to the pictures." I said, No, we'll take a group of us. A group? And it's almost like I'd suggested that we, sort of join a satanic cult.
Was it considered, you think, that it might have been scandalous? Not because there was a male-female relationship, but just because of their charism, if you like.
The sisters won't have lunch with him. They won't have a meal with him. That's how tight things are for them. They will have a cup of tea with the family, but they won't eat with them. So that's just part of the thing that they do. They are in the world, but from the world apart. Now, to give you an idea of how people wrestle with that, a friend of mine, Paulita, I've known her for 32 years. And we're almost the same age. We met. And I've always been very close to her as a person. You can't know a person that long and work with them constantly without being close. And we had a friend named Julian Campos from Spain. He was 7'4". He was a bull of a man. And I went to visit her with him one day, and he can't speak English and I can't speak Spanish.
7'4". Yep.
So we're sitting there talking Bengali on the train like this. And the local people looking at us going, "I don't know Bengali." But we'd been there for a long time. We knew enough to communicate with each other. And so when we got to the home and it was beautiful, and we left, Julian went home and he was killed. There was a train crash. I think it was around about 2008 or 2009. On the train coming back from Santiago de Compostela, where people do the Camino Santiago to. He was on a train and it was crushed, and he was the last person, I suppose, at the end of the train to get killed. So when I went back the next year, I visited her, and she sat and had a meal with me on my own. First time. And I said, "Do you think I'm going to die?" She said, "No." But she wouldn't. But obviously it was the reaction to Julian.
Yeah.
But they kind of do renounce themselves. Like India is a country for renunciation. like I'm just kidding. We got plenty of time. Like, have you ever heard of the saffron colour? Saffron?
Yes.
Saffron is a colour in India for self-renunciation. So the sadhus and the sannyasis will wear saffron. Some of the Jesuit priests will wear like a saffron stole to indicate that they, as priests, are not only ordained, but that they have renounced themselves. And that's what Christ calls us to. Unless you take up your cross and renounce yourself, you cannot be my disciple. And we kind of like to sort of, I don't know, to be the disciple without the renunciation. But even priests, the amount of crap I have in my house. Like, I was moved from Wanneroo recently. Now, when my friend Stephen became an MC, he took a Bible with him, that's it. When I moved from Wanneroo, a Bible. Yeah, it's the Bible. What did you think I said?
Bible.
A Bible. But when I moved from Wanneroo to Mundaring, I couldn't take all my stuff in the first or the second or the third or the fourth go because I acquired so much stuff. Admittedly, being a priest here is different. I need a computer. I do, and I have books. I have sort of books that I use to study, and I like to read books, and I think it makes you a better priest if you're reading lots of different things. But you acquire stuff, and the last few years I've been trying to declutter. And that's not a bad way. If it was my way, I'd just be sleeping on the floor on the carpet with a pillow. But the next priest comes and goes, "What the hell's wrong with that priest? There's no table, there's no kettle. What the hell's going on?" So we've got to be practical. We live in a world, but at the same time, we've got to be sufficiently prepared to renounce ourselves in order to serve Christ. There's always a tension. There should always be a tension. If we're not feeling the tension, we're not doing it wrong. So, I don't know if you have any questions or anything. Like, I feel like I'm sort of dominating.
How do they sustain their commitment?
That's a good
Because
question.
you can talk about the strength of God and the Holy Spirit and that kind of thing, but surely it must just get too in the heart sometimes. You just have people leave.
People do leave. People have left. And for instance, as an example, I think of when you say that, but prayer is key. An hour of adoration every day. Like, do you know Henry Nguyen, the spiritual writer, the Catholic spiritual writer? Henry Nguyen, a lot of you read books. He says to Mother Teresa, "Would you be my spiritual director?" And she said, "Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament is the best spiritual director." That's what she said to him. So the sisters will sit before the Blessed Sacrament 1 hour, maybe more a day if they can. But for instance, there's one sister I know, Sister Michael, she's a doctor. Now, there's not a lot of doctors in the Missionaries of Charity. So I felt so much pain for Michael. I know Michael really well. And I'm sitting there praying and I see people come in and whisper in her ear and she's off to care for someone. She comes back and she kneels down, then someone whispers in her ear and she's off again. So it...
So let you get her hour of prayer, it takes a long time.
Yeah. And she talks to me a lot, so she'll talk to me and she'll say that sometimes she finds it difficult to be a sister and a doctor. But she's the most generous, self-sacrificing person, and I'm sure she's been close to the ultimate place where you go when you can't cope, is nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
That's where you go, and I have
Seeing that kind of distress
Yeah.
people that you find on the streets, I mean, and not being, especially as a doctor, not being able to provide the level of care which you might be able to if you're funny and you're in a hospital and so forth. That would be really distressing for someone such as
you discover your limitation, and you find a need for God. But prayer is the essence of the Mass. Like every morning when I say Mass, and I got this from India, is we gather around the table of the Lord to be nourished this morning by the Word and Sacrament, and we do. And when you become a daily Mass goer, you know what that means. You do get nourished by the Word and Sacrament. And it just gives you the strength and sometimes the balance to be able to cope with those kind of situations. Even as a priest here in Perth, Western Australia, I'm sure parents struggle at times with their children, with your husbands and wives. I'm sure there are times when they drive you out to the backyard and dig a hole and hide in it. You know, sort of never. You have the perfect marriage. But priests do the same too. You know, like I was telling someone recently, we got nowhere to hide because we had to say mass every morning. And there was about maybe 2 years ago, I think I was close to this breakdown. And someone who came to mass one morning, she diagnosed me as having post-traumatic stress. And she didn't tell me, she told her mother who told me. Others can't help it really, can they? That's all I need is to know that. So, but I knew something was wrong, but I was dealing with it as best I could. But I still had to come and say mass every day, and that was torture.
And your sermon as well.
It was a very brief sermon those days. It was torturous. It was really hard, and I think that's just part of life. You know, whether you're a religious person, I'm sure all of you have got your own tales about the moments when you got close to that yourselves, and you've got no where do you hide?
They don't want people to think, well, you're a priest, you shouldn't have that, you shouldn't be stressed.
Yeah.
People don't expect priests to.
It's interesting, like, well, I did a funeral last week, and, you know, I had a busy week. I had a year 12 retreat for the kids from the college to which I'm chaplain, and then I had a number of other things, a wedding on the Saturday, a baptism on the Sunday, and I was trying to fit the homily in on the Friday, and then I'm going to see a girl tomorrow who's 19, she's got Ewing's carcinoma, which is a cancer that attacks young people particularly, and she'd lost half of her rib cage on the left when I saw her 2 years ago. But I went to see her, I'd known her since she was a little child, and but she had two years of remission and now it's back. So I'm going to see her and mum and dad and her 2 sisters and brother tomorrow. But those sort of things weigh on you, and I know another family in Sydney. You know, the mother's just been diagnosed with leukemia, and the daughter has been diagnosed with a behavioural issue, and then you've got 20 or 30 of these things happening at any given time, and you're trying to write, like the mother in Sydney wants me to write a little card to the girl who's suffering, and I know her well enough, but it's trying to find the time to sit and write the card that needs to be written. I can't just write a crappy old thing. It's got to be the right card. So yeah, like, but for sisters, you know, like they deal with it. Like I remember saying to one of the sisters in Calcutta a few years back, I said, so how's your life? And she goes, yes, good. And I said, no, but how is your life? And she goes, oh, shut up. We're not going to talk about that. I'll tell you how my vocation's going. But yes, precisely. But it's in some respects, yeah, like I'm still working with them to try and acknowledge that humanity a bit more, which is, but again, it's a very subtle path you need to walk. But yeah, look, I love them dearly. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions again. Don't be shy. Like,
this recharging of the battery through prayer that Mother Teresa was very strong on, like the hours adoration every day, the mass every day.
Yes.
I know some people found that staggering when those floods were on in Pakistan, and the sisters were helping out there. And the organiser said, do you mind if they don't come back for the hour in the afternoon for adoration? And they thought Mother Teresa would take that fine. But she said, no, if they don't come back, they'll get burned out. Yeah. They need to come back. It's like an electrical device. You've got to plug it in and recharge it. And that's how she was picturing it for the people who were the organisers. But from what you've just said, you can have that and you're still human. And in the psychologists and social workers, they get together on Friday afternoon with the senior one, and they sit down and they bear each other's burdens, if you like, they're given some guidance, and they share. Do priests have that type of thing? Do you have other priests that you go to? Do you go and share, how's it going for you type of thing? Or is it left simply between yourself and God?
We've been discussing this a lot recently as a group, and we don't feel comfortable to talk to each other a lot about our own kind of like frailty. because it has a lot of stigma attached to it. So, you know, I was very fortunate in Wanneroo because I had the same secretary for 11 years. And so she is my confidant. So,
Yes.
and so we're best of friends, and she's happily married with 2 children. It's never an issue. But I've got no issue saying she's my closest friend. So. And so she's my confidant. So she's saved me a number of times.
Yes.
I remember one day she saw me, I just came in and I was moaning about something. I don't moan very often, but I was moaning about something. She stood up and she gave me a hug, and she said, "That's all I can do for you at the moment. You need to go away somewhere." That's what she said. So she said, "Leave your credit card on the table. I'll book you on a flight to Rome. You always wanted to go there. I'll book you into Domus, Australia. You always wanted to stay there. And then you can stay there for 8 days and come straight back into a seminar." And I said, "Go for it." So, saved my life. Saved my life. So. But that's the person. We need to have people like that in our life. Like principal. My principal is always my confidant as well, because principals, like I'm a chaplain at a primary school and a very big Catholic college in Edgewater. And so both principals, I will always go into their office and close the door and say, "How's things?"
Yes.
And so they need to debrief as well. And so sometimes we will trust each other confidentially and debrief.
Yeah.
So that's all a good thing as well. So, and that's always very good for the parish and the school, because it builds a closer link.
Right.
In my opinion, it builds a closer link, and then you become more kind of like emotionally linked as people, and also as bodies of parish and school. So yeah, it's important to have someone, but I think there are a lot of priests who don't have someone.
Yes. I worry about priests.
I ring around a lot of priests I don't know of, like I ring priests who retired and now who are doing supply workers, and one of them always goes, "Thanks for ringing, John, thanks for ringing."
Yeah.
You know, and we always chat for 40 minutes or an hour, and I ring another one that's struggling a bit, and another one that's just been put somewhere else. I ring around to the guys I think might struggle, but that's just 6 or 7 that I know.
Yes.
I imagine especially people who may be in rural places and
Yes,
they're
yeah.
isolated too.
Well, rural places. So I left Bateman Parish, where I met you, and my going away mass was 1,000 people at mass. And do you know how many people at my first mass in Gimali? 1. And I sat on the step for about 4 days and saying,
Why am I here?
precisely.
That's right.
It's loneliness, which is what one of the other presenters was talking about. Huge
Hugely
loneliness.
loneliness.
Yes.
But I'm a kind of like a mad athlete, which is good for me. Long distance runner, I will ride 4 hours sometimes on my bike, or I'll go walking. Sometimes, if I've got nothing on in the day, like a Monday, or maybe after mass on the day when we've got nothing, I'll drive my car to the Munday in Weir, and I'll walk 19 kilometres to Kalamunda, have a pint, and walk back.
Yeah, you got the point. You can't dehydrate. You've got to do this properly.
It's very productively spent time, because I'm with God.
Yeah.
And I'm being healed at all times.
Yes.
We just had an outreach in November to the Valley. And about 45.
45 of us.
I would have loved that. Who was there, Father Daniel? Father Patrick.
Father Patrick
That's been moved now to Scarborough. They got Father Daniel.
He had been moved already, but he just came up.
We
Okay.
came up for that special mass, and we thought, we're a bit disappointed because we thought we'd get a few more people from Domains. But we're probably at about 10 people there from Domains all together.
Sounds like there's a lot of people.
Well, Father said, well, that's a good roll up, that's a good
They'd rather have to go and do mass at a couple of the other towns.
Yeah, you have a number of times.
Celia's family,
Jonathan, yeah.
when they're going, it's even then, it was us.
Yeah, we can
and
all
2
them.
more, and
Well,
that's it.
Tui and her husband David and her mother-in-law and father-in-law, they've been with Father too. With 2J, was it 2J Northern you went to, Tui, for the mass? The extra masses when you were in Gamalin?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So they went and did the early mass. And
I used to have 8 towns up there. And I remember going to Dalwalley on Saturday morning at 9:30, and sometimes they'd forget to come. So I'd say mass on my own, for the town. Because I thought it was important.
Yeah.
But there was always a mother and two girls. They were my only parishioners in Dalwallinu. And the two girls were so different. You know, one was really petite and ladylike, the other one was like Bam Bam out of things. Talk about parental kind of alteration, like obviously being too harsh on that one. Let's get this one be, free reign. And she's like in year 2, grabbing boys and kissing them at school. But I used to teach those girls how to catch jelly beans. I used to go, I'll show you this. So we were very good at that. We used to try and see who could do the most in a row. So the Archbishop comes up and he's talking to the girls and goes, so what's Father John taught you? So they go, hang on, we'll just get some jelly. Archbishop Higgy couldn't do it. So. But he said that his mouse wasn't big enough.
What was it saying about you?
Yes. The obvious things. But you know what, you can really, in a country town, you can really make a difference. But you've got to make an effort. Like, I remember baptising 7 people in Ballaghy in one day alone. They hadn't had anyone baptised there for 3 years. I said, round up the little heathens, we'll get them all together, we'll baptise the lot all at once. And the whole town came out, even the non-Catholics. And we had a big thing in the park afterwards, a barbecue and a game of cricket. It was just unbelievable. It was terrific.
My mother lived in Carmarthen, we born and raised in Carmarthen. So that was one of the reasons that
You went
James
there.
and I decided to go there. But I was just blown away by the outreach. It was just absolutely wonderful. And the people that we met in the town were beautiful people. It was pretty round up.
Amazing, I was there. It was like people leave the cars unlocked.
Yeah.
Wallace and Bart, and I walk away from them and said, you couldn't do that in person. What car would be gone? What would be gone? Or empty?
Yeah, it's a lovely place.
Yeah.
But 2 little happens.
Yeah, it's just exactly that sort of feels like, oh, don't you make one of these and I'll be right.
Teresa, are the groups that go there of all different ages?
Yeah, you'll get university groups in the United States. You'll get there was an Australian group of year 12s going, and it was by an Anglican priest. I think he's a Catholic priest, and that was called Pilgrimage Road. And Trinity College sent a group over once every 2 or 3
I know
years.
in schools, I mean older people.
Oh, older people?
Yes.
Oh, yes, your groups go there as well. But more Spanish or Italian. But certainly, there would be lots of groups there, yeah, at varying points in time. Like you'd expect the Spanish and the Americans to come at a particular time of year, and the Australians. But Australians were generally people who come alone. Japanese would come as a group. And I always remember the Japanese, where they would kneel down in the chapel, and more people would come in. And it's so Japanese, they're in like a square in formation. And they realise that they need to tighten up, so they go they're like a single being. Yes. They're like a single being. So, but yeah, like you can go as groups or you can go as an individual. Like my old parish wants me to take a group there because just before I left, I got moved very quickly, very suddenly, because there was some urgent need elsewhere. And I'd taken a pilgrimage to Italy, which was terrifically successful, it was wonderful. And everyone's going, what about a pilgrimage to Calcutta? So I'm thinking of taking them at one point, but just maybe a handful or so. So it's a tough place. It's a tough place, and you've got issues with water, you've got issues with diarrhea, you've got potential other health issues, and then you've got pavements which you cannot take your eyes off the pavement, otherwise you can break your ankle. Then you've got traffic and rickshaws and motorbikes and dogs and rats. It's just chaos. Has anyone been there? Has anyone been there?
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, it's just a full-on assault. It's fine. But I always feel very comfortable there. I was there, the first time I was there was in 1990, population 750 million in India. Wow. What's the population in India now? 1.35 billion. That means since I first went there in 1990, the population has increased by 500 million. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. So, you're dealing with that kind of getting on buses. Like, getting on a bus might be easy in Madras, it might be easy in Darjeeling. Get on one in Calcutta. Ugh. You just see the bus go by and you see everyone hang off and go, I'll wait for the next one. Don't, just get on there. So, because the next one's the same.
Next one's the same.
Yeah, so I end up walking, you know, sort of pick me thongs up in my hand and walk barefoot through the streets. And you know, but not everyone can do that. So, but I've taken volunteers onto buses, and then they've got really crowded. And I'm trying to get people off buses, almost pulling them across the shoulders of the people, trying to get them out at the right stop. So it's chaos. Okay, so sorry.
It's very hard to imagine.
Yeah, like it's not hard to imagine when you're there. Like you wish you couldn't see it, but it's but there's a beauty about the place. There's something special about that place. Yeah, well, there is. You know, it's a very strong sense of Hinduism and the temple of Kali, which is right next to Mother Teresa.